go through. I know Bill's ready to do to talk about the heating and ventilation and the 10-year capital. Those are pretty concrete concepts. But maybe the easiest one to do first is do we have a couple of volunteers who can talk about the interim report at a school committee meeting?
Yeah, I'd like to be
You'd like
those.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. Somebody want to help Bob do the presentation? I mean, Lorraine will be there, Mark will be there, Lynn will be there. I mean,
I'm willing to participate, help out, speak up.
people don't want another meeting up. For those who are going to be there already, it's probably easiest.
I'm happy to go.
Yeah. Oh,
No, sure.
okay.
When is it going to be?
Actually, it's probably going to be June 3rd.
Is that Tuesday?
It's a Wednesday. And I'd say it's only tentative. We have an organizational meeting to get through, but I assume we're going to choose the same weekday because that gives every town a night, and we're on a night, and that way we're not conflicting.
That's not going to be a night at Tri-Town?
I haven't.
First Wednesday.
Yeah, I haven't seen
It's at
that.
night, right? It's not, what time's the
It'll be 6 o'clock.
Yeah. I think I can go.
Okay, that'd be great.
Do you want more than just 2 people there?
I think it'd be great to have as many who can be there.
Yeah.
So perfect. All right.
June 3rd, 6 o'clock, unless we hear from you otherwise.
Yeah, I'll definitely send out an invitation so you know exactly what night it is and so forth. So we had some action items. Did we reach consensus on all of our action items for interim report 2?
Well, I think we just put them up as things to be considered, but not really
Right.
agenda.
Yeah, I think
not assigned to
the only
anything.
action item we had was to go to the school committee and ask for the enrollment study.
Right. So do we want to look at other action items, or do we want to kind of wait until after we present to the school committee?
Well, the detailed list of heating or ventilation issues that was one of our outstanding action items from the first report. Reviewing a 10-year plan for maintenance and capital, that's something we can move ahead on.
Right.
The demographic data in action, I think, I don't know what there is to say about that except, we're going to go to the school committee unless we want to have some kind of recommendation about what should be included in that. I don't know how people feel about that. And for the first one, I think that's a big deal. I'm not really sure how to address that.
Right.
So that's where I think the most discussion would be.
I agree. So I think my vote would be to start with something concrete like HVAC and
Sure.
the maintenance.
Okay. I can pass these out.
Do others feel the same way? I don't want
Yeah.
to be ready to go.
So as they're coming around, I'll just get started. The 2 documents that I passed out, one of them I looked at a 10-year scheduled maintenance or capital plan for the high school, looking at the different equipment there, the different rooms there, and going on the thought of status quo, that the building stays the way it is, and we try to meet the needs that we can see that I've been told through my discussions over the past few years. So some of the things I looked at were just ongoing things that really pop up every year, and that's like athletic field maintenance. Throughout the years, there's always maintenance required there. Auditorium lights, camera upgrades, as technology changes, as servers need to be upgraded, those things throughout the cycle would need to be upgraded. The system we have now is about 8 years old, so, over time, it's gonna need to be replaced and repaired. Baseball, softball field repairs, they've been on the market. We get some feedback now and again about, the fields and some work we need to do. Then things that are closer to the 5-year plan stayed in here, which would be like rekeying the building. Roofing projects, I looked out over 10 years or so and figured we would probably have to look at we just did the area over the gym lobby last year. We would also need to look at like the area over the science lab wing, and then the area over the guidance, potentially the auditorium, although right now that area seems okay, but 10 years is tough to look out, so I just want to make sure we capture it. Some improvements in the woods and metal shops, and that would be more geared towards a STEM initiative, whether that type of programming changes as the next 10 years progress. Woods and metals, the area we're looking at, or is more of a STEM prototyping engineering type environment, the direction we're going. Wastewater treatment plants, there's always things you have to do in that plant to keep things up and running. I looked at window replacement. There are some windows that will absolutely need to be replaced as the building sits status quo, especially in the science wing. Our boilers, we have water heaters in our boilers. Over the next 10 years, I could see those 2 boilers will be approaching their 20-year lifespan, 15 to 20 year, and we try to keep up with the preventive maintenance, but there's always the chance that something could happen. So, over the next 10 years, I think we need to realistically think that there could be some boiler replacements.
So they're only 5 years old right now?
No, now they would be 15 years old.
Today?
Creeping up on 15 years here when the building was done, so I'm saying the next 5 years, we're looking at 20, the next 10 years, we're looking at 25. So in the next 10 years, those 2 boilers will need to be replaced. Parking lot repair and replacement, I look at every 5 years or so doing some sort of substantial parking lot, phasing it throughout in the years in between doing line restriping and patch repair work. HVAC is a tough one because we do have our issues, and I'll get into it a little more. We do have our issues with HVAC, but those issues could be compounded depending on what we decide to do. If we split classrooms, add more people, that all affects the capacity and the requirements. So just to maintain HVAC, I usually keep a standard scheduled maintenance budget to keep things up and running, but to improve, that would take a little more of an effort. Conference rooms, teachers' rooms, we spoke about reconfiguring the guidance suite. I tried to capture that. Cafeteria expansion, we know we need more room in the cafeteria, so I captured some costs there, and we talked originally about maybe putting a modular or adding some space. Controls, that always just comes with time because, technology keeps moving forward. Upgrading the computer labs to make sure they have enough airflow capacity so the rooms don't get hot. As technology increases, more components come into the room, time rolls on, more components, and we wind up needing additional HVAC requirements. And then the locker rooms are an issue. We need to figure out a way to get fresh air into them. It's very stagnant down there. The upper gym units would need to be replaced over probably the next 5 to 10 years. Locker rooms could really use updating, just space-wise. They aren't conducive to the programming we're trying to put in there. I know in the girls' locker room, we have probably 40 or 50 showers that don't get used, but we have 0 locker space for the students, both, taking gym class, they get these little baskets, or, and the athletes don't have actual lockers. So there's some room.
Where are you getting these estimates?
Which estimates?
Like, $300,000 for the locker room updates. I mean, if you're just taking out plumbing and putting in
Right, I looked at
lockers, I mean, that just seems excessive.
Well, no, you'd have to do quite a bit of, you'd have to rip the floors up, so you have to change plumbing around. I looked at a square footage price of a remodel of a typical space like that. Again, depending on what the menu is, what we want to look at for a menu, that could go way down, that could go way up. I'm just trying to...
So you just use means,
Yes.
worst case.
Right, I'm just trying to shoot in the ballpark so we can, really we could, if we wanted to, we could not even look at the numbers. I mean, I think it's important to have kind of an idea, but
Is it even worst cases? I mean, that number doesn't include like HVAC upgrades or kind of any of that stuff.
Well, that would kind of
We
fall
didn't
into
see
some of
that.
the other HVAC stuff, because like I said, when you do some sort of remodel or a change, it rolls into other areas. IT gets affected, you know, HVAC would obviously get affected, controls would, so there's a lot going on there.
So it's in other numbers.
It's in other numbers also, and again, it depends on our taste. You know, if we wanna just knock out one bank of showers and add a bank of lockers, well, that may be a $50,000 job. If we wanna do a full remodel, it could be a $1.2 million job. It's, you know, it's,
Well, what caught my eye though at first was the athletic fields, because when we were talking about actually changing over from the athletic fields to getting the turf field,
Yep.
at that point in time, we were only spending $45,000 to rejuvenate or reconstitute all of the fields, the 5 fields. And now you're up to 250, and I'm like, well, we've got the fencing, so I'm not really I don't understand why it's up that high.
so well, 250 is in ongoing over 10 years, you know. Money going in every few years to maybe add new clay infield on both fields, new bases, rehab the batting cages on the field, add equipment. A big renovation, maybe renew the dugouts, take the dugouts down, put new dugouts in, strip the sod, put an irrigation system in. Again, I'm just trying to, 10 years out is a,
Well, but I had thought also that when you're talking about the dugout fields, why would you do that when the plan is to move the baseball field way into the back?
but that's no longer the plan because there's not enough space there. We would have less than 150 feet to, or less than 180 feet to right field, and even with a green monster type wall, it would be enough.
So that came out after the guy actually drew the plans up for you guys?
No one ever drew a plan out for that one, for the field up there. That was one of the discussions we had of, could that be an option? Could we move? And although it looks like we have a lot of space, the topography of the land goes up
Right.
quite severely as you go from lower field to upper field.
Right.
And in order to get a decent right field, you know, the way you have to set a baseball field for the sun, where we want to put right field, it would cost, you know, a guy came out and told us, you know, you could be looking at a couple $100,000 to strip the land back and put a retaining wall, so.
Because the initial plan for the $4.4 million had the baseball field in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a spot, and you're saying that they put it out there and there was no space?
Well, I think part of that, they would have done some excavation. You know, they would have had to, you could get it there, you just have to take a lot of the hillside out and add retaining walls and do some work there. Not something we do outside of that project.
That was a lot of regrading and all that.
Yeah, that whole area was being regraded and repurposed with different fields.
Without another multi-million-dollar project, which
Right.
I don't, that would be a priority over.
So I look now at just simply fields stay where they are and over the 10 years,
Okay.
working on them. So with additional locker rooms, HVAC, the kitchen unit upgrades, sprinkler head, we coming up on our 20-year. After 20 years, you have to replace the sprinkler heads per code. So there's some work coming in there. Fire panel is an older panel, 15 years old. As code changes, as products break, it becomes antiquated. And I think eventually we're gonna have to look at some fire panel upgrades. And then areas that I didn't even ballpark numbers on are things we spoke about, like science lab upgrades. We knew that from the MSBA project was a, potentially a multi-million-dollar project. IT and network upgrades, depending on what the future holds. Space build-outs, future needs for classrooms. Auditorium needs for lighting, for sound, for curtains. And we spoke about partitions in the auditorium, being able to create additional classroom space. Then the building facade, the outside of the building, looking over 10 years, is needs there. And at the beginning, we spoke about like a retro commissioning type program, which I think is still a good idea, having someone come in and look at the building as we stand now and give us a report of, basically a commissioning report, which you would normally get once the building is built. It would give us a better idea of where we are today.
In the sense of utility utilization and the like, is that a commissioning activity?
You would go into utility utilization, actually they go through and they check all the, the HVAC systems for true capacity. What was it designed for and what is it delivering?
Yep.
Water flow, making sure that the boilers are delivering the temperatures and water pressures, and, that the windows meet certain requirements, or what do the windows mean?
Basically,
The facade, the R value of the envelope of the building, the roof structures, they go through the whole soup to nuts and give us a report.
It's optimization of the systems and then kind of whatever cost reductions might have if you did some certain upgrades or what have you to kind of reduce your utility bills by, upgrades or optimization of the systems.
so it's typical that when you put a new building in, the stuff is not adjusted properly for whatever good or bad reason, and equivalently, the building hasn't really, besides ordinary maintenance, may or may not have had the full investigation of that flavor.
Correct.
Now, 30 or 20 years later.
20 years
depending on what
later,
systems were
do
put
we
in.
truly have a
Right.
room that is it's supposed to get X amount of air at so much temperature?
Right.
Is that actually what we're getting in that room?
Right.
We know in the process of building center school, at the end, they came in and they measured those components and gave us a report. That's a commissioning report, so this
So
would
you're
be,
hiring a commissioner?
well, that's
Is it,
one of the recommendations, a thought here is maybe we bring in a commissioning agent who could do a retro report on the building and kind of tell us where we're at. Yes.
If we followed this plan and continued something similar to this plan in the future, would the building itself and the major systems hold up for another 50 years? Or at some point you just say, to the best of your knowledge?
50 years, I don't think I could talk to, but 10 years, I think I could say, yeah, I mean, with some obvious upgrades we would need to do, 10, 20 years, I think we have.
Well, you got a 10-year plan here, so you're saying if we did this, the major systems would last another 10 years.
Within 10 years, we're replacing major systems.
But that's part of this plan.
That's part of this plan.
Okay.
Yes, I'm looking at the major systems such as the
But you're not
boiler.
gonna have to gut any pipes that go from one end of the building to the other.
Not without some unforeseen catastrophic failure.
So that's, now again, I know you've got like HVAC upgrades, and obviously IT requirements are gonna change over the next 10 years. So
Right.
you can't say that, what you have in place now is gonna last 10 years, but with this kind of plan in place, the major systems are all addressed and, assuming no change in capacity requirements, this stuff could go on for the foreseeable future.
This is basically a plan that says the building we have today is the building we'd see in 10 years, 20 years.
Okay.
This same issues, when something breaks, we fix it, we keep our preventive maintenance going. We know that a boiler isn't gonna last forever, and in
Well,
50,
that's what I'm asking, is there something that, a roof that's not in here, and when it goes, that's it, we're done with
no,
that?
I don't see anything
Okay.
like that, cracks in the foundation or areas that I would say, this
All right.
has a lifespan of 10 years, and
That's the
then
kind of thing I was
we're
looking
done.
for.
There is a heavy maintenance and capital planning needs,
Yeah,
and, by maintaining that and staying on it, the building we have is the building we'll have.
okay.
But just to be clear, these are addressing certain things that are getting replaced, but there's some things about HVAC repairs and HVAC controls that aren't a whole lot of money. But if you're talking about fixing the HVAC so you have good air, kind of good distribution of air throughout the building, I don't think anything you're proposing here would remedy all those things and make it,
No, that's a whole different, like I said, the building we
Okay.
have would be the building
Okay.
we
yeah, so
have.
it's not getting all new systems and everything optimized.
So where we
It's
have
kinda-
shortcomings, they
They
remain.
would stay, yeah.
Right, we would have to address that separately and on an
Separate
ongoing.
capital item.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this is status quo,
Yeah.
kind of general
Okay. But
inspection,
nothing would
testing,
get,
maintenance.
nothing would get worse.
Right, that's the way I look, nothing would get worse.
Fingers crossed.
Barring a catastrophic,
Yeah.
unforeseen.
You got a whole bunch of this stuff loaded in 2017. Is that just because,
That was just because I don't really have, depending on what the committee comes up with and what the
Yeah,
future
alright.
needs are, I said those could slide out. I just wanted to keep it in an area where
Okay.
we could discuss.
okay, that's what I was hoping you'd say.
Yeah.
So what does that have to do with these pictures and this
Okay,
phase one
so
work?
the next item is areas over the past, I'd say plus years of walking around the building and talking to people and taking notes and hearing the different needs, I've been looking at, as I see it, I call it a phase, but it could be an area, however we want to say it, areas that I would look at to try to maybe bring the building from status quo up to that next level that we're trying to approach. Areas we would need to address, some of it would be the lobby work and what could be done in there, you know, bringing them up, putting in floors.
What's wrong with the lobby?
I think now you'd probably say it's antiquated. I mean, our front lobby, you walk in and we have a, you know,
Is it broken?
it's not broken, but it's
Okay.
antiquated.
So you wanna spruce it up?
Spruce it up,
Okay,
yeah.
that's not a need.
But all I'm trying to do is, put information out.
No, that's fine.
I mean, we could take out a lot of these as not needs.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do is just kind of tell you what's on my mind and what I've heard and the plans that people have told me they'd be interested in seeing. And, you know, comparatively to what we've seen in other schools that we compete with, or, so, I mean, again, lobby work, trying to update where we are when people walk in and they see our building. Some next area, I looked at the athletics area, the cage in the upper gym, moving around to allow some better weight training facilities, CrossFit facilities, and adding additional space. We have some storage spaces that maybe we could remove and retool as additional athletics area. This current metals and wood workshop, changing that over to a STEM suite and what we could do in that room. That was something we spoke about. Cafeteria work, changing out the cafeteria, the floor plan, the layout, adding space into there, because we always have the issue where we don't have enough space. The media center, we've talked about adding flexible space into that room, quiet space, putting up glass partitions, remodeling that area, so that it could actually add maybe a few more flexible or permanent classrooms, some additional computer space, and some quiet study space. We talked about in the back, maybe putting some glass partitions up that could move and be flexible.
When you say add classrooms number 2 and number 4,
Right.
what does that mean?
That would mean 750 square feet is fairly small for a classroom, but carving out a couple areas up there, and maybe it's by partitions or through doors that could be, if you walk through the media center, there's a lot of, I think there could be a more efficient flow or use of the space. So maybe taking some of those areas that are tucked off to the corner and blocking them off, or come up with a creative way to create additional classroom space. Again, finding additional classroom space, maybe whether it's by reorganizing teachers or storage spaces or splitting larger classrooms. Tough area to look at. Science lab, we already talked that the science labs do need a remodel, and this captures that. The boys' locker room and the girls' locker room, they both could use updated fixtures, improvements to the HVAC system, repair and replacement of lockers, flooring. The hallway captures the outside where we do the laundry there. And then I looked at general repairs, roofs, and that captured somewhat in here. Roofs over the science wing, new windows, HVAC repairs and upgrades, and parking, and then some other general repairs.
Is phase 9 the only part that's also on your spreadsheet?
Well, I think some of them do cross over, like I do have like this, I think I carried the,
Like I'm asking about the locker rooms and,
right, in here, his locker room updates,
yeah,
but depending, again, on the scope, this came out after these. This is more my thoughts on paper,
Yeah.
from my travels through the building and speaking with people, and,
so this is more expansive than what's in here?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So perhaps a nice way to describe this is hypothetical opportunities to improve the building just because people are complaining or there's
Yeah.
various kinds of
Yeah, I think
unhappiness
that's-
and just, they're discretionary in the sense of, does administration or the school committee or whoever say, yes, we think this unhappiness is worth improving. And so you're basically warning us, these are opportunities for everybody to really consider as part of the whole.
Right, I'm looking at
ball
the,
of wax for
within
this
the
building.
envelope we have, what can we do?
Yeah.
And based on the feedback and.
But really, what do we need to do?
I
And
think
then-
that's what
and
the
then-
state needs to determine.
Right, and then distinctly, the utility things here is just basically saying, just to maintain your building, you're gonna need all these things at some point, and just because they wear out and they're machinery, and we know, your best guess is a facilities guy saying, this machinery is gonna need attention because we need it.
These are the
Right.
things I think keeps us, even if not trying to get ahead of the game over the next 10 years.
Right.
This brings us up to the next level.
Great.
Remodel, maybe bringing it up to some of the schools we've seen that have done full remodels, whatever, again, whatever this committee decides is important. And we can pick and choose and think of it as a buffet menu.
Does this stuff, does it add square footage to the building, or is it capturing space and turning it into?
There's some areas here that I looked at. The only area here I would say expands is the cafeteria. I think I called out some area of cafeteria expansion, which would probably look at like a modular or maybe capturing some space inside the courtyard.
Right.
But the other areas, I didn't look at anything as far as growing out.
Or reconfigure space?
We were reconfiguring and enhancing.
Yep.
So what is the most important thing that we do if we go and do one?
I think if we stay in the building where we're at, is maintain the capital projects.
Yeah.
I mean, maintain status quo, what we have. I don't know here what would be the most important thing. I mean, I'm sure I could say science labs, and you may say, yeah, that's great, but you may say, oh, no, we need.
But in the maintenance and operation of the building, and safety, what one thing would you need to do to keep the building?
Maintain the capital and scheduled maintenance plan, which is
So just
here.
keep doing maintenance.
Yeah, keep doing maintenance. I mean, if that, I think that's what, without doing that, we lose the building,
Right.
period. I mean, then we don't have a
But you would
10-year.
have, but you would have had that anyways. Nobody's telling you to stop doing maintenance.
Right, right, and, but you asked me what I think is the most important thing, and to me, that is the most important thing. Beyond that, everything else is improvements. Capital planning keeps the doors open and the building safe. Beyond that, we're talking improvements, and I think that's subjective. We could all kind of probably have our own thought of what's the most important thing.
Okay, so Perry, as the principal, aside from maintenance, if we can only do one thing, what would you pick?
Well, I mean, I would agree with what Bill just said. First thing is making sure that when we show up each morning, we can get into our classrooms, if there's heating, if there's cooling, if it's safe, the doors are locked, all that sort of stuff. I mean, right now, the most immediate need is additional classroom space. But,
And the two classrooms that you're getting this summer, we're still getting those, right?
Yes.
I'm planning on them, yeah.
Okay, well, just make sure, because they were questionable for a little bit.
So, I mean,
So-
that certainly helps. We will continue to be tight because we're adding students and adding staff,
But
but
if
that
he's,
certainly helps.
but if he's sectioning off parts of the cafeteria, the classrooms,
No,
What is-
media
I didn't see.
did I?
Media
Media
center.
center.
It's just the
Media
media,
center.
what does that do to the media center?
Oh, you take away from the general overall spaces.
Square footage of media center.
It makes it more flexible for other kinds of use.
But does it take away the use, the general use of the media center, or what it
I
was?
mean, if you take away square footage in the media center, it's gonna have some sort of.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the whole issue is over time, the building's been cannibalized to kind of create other things at the impact of
Mhm.
other departments. I mean,
And
kind of like it's,
The hope to this wouldn't be, over the summer, we're slamming up a couple petition walls and hoping for the best. It would be a thoughtful, engineered approach to the space.
Not that just because someone else did it, it's right for us, but as I sent you on an email, I went to the Concord Carlisle High School, and they did a dramatic cut to the size of their library between the old building and the new building. They cut it drastically, in part because they wanted the space for something else. So, but you know, the library, you gotta figure out what the purpose of the library is,
Yep.
except someplace kids go when they don't wanna hang around in the hallway outside the auditorium during study. Right? What's the purpose of the library and the media center in that case?
So I think that thoughtful approach too, what the library was when it was originally designed to what it's actually used for today and over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Although I still do need space for kids to go
Yeah.
there, not classes.
Well, those are those additional.
Those are those
classes.
dugouts, that's the dugout renovation.
Other questions about the 10-year plan first?
I think I forget how the budget worked out for fiscal 16. I think there was a reduction in maintenance, and I was wondering for the high school, and I was wondering if that was, how that influenced your column of fiscal 16.
The actual,
I forget what actually the final decision was, so I just would like my memory refreshed and.
the reductions that were captured were really expansion or reconfiguration of space. The actual operation maintenance budget stayed solid, which is very appreciated. It was more of looking
So
at,
the optional things in the sense, just like this is kind of optional, these kinds of things we say,
We were looking
okay,
at
we'll
maybe-
sit tight with those, is
Yes.
that kind of?
adding a
is that-
conference room, or making the existing conference room a little bigger, maybe
Yeah.
changing around some office spaces and some classrooms. Those were the things that were taken out of the budget, but the actual operations and scheduled maintenance costs stayed
Got it.
fairly solid, which was.
How about for like the building envelope insulation type stuff? I guess really see it, you know, in the 10-year or in the future, you know, kind of,
Well, I called out here building facade upgrade, so that would be the area where I'd
capturing
be.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
kind
There-
of, okay, yeah.
And that really is kind of a ongoing, difficult to capture a hard number.
Yeah.
Even these numbers are a little difficult,
No,
you
no.
know, I think I'm just trying to,
But some of those numbers down here that you didn't put numbers to, the categories could be
these
pretty
ones-
big numbers.
Well, we know the science lab upgrade came in with the NSBA at, you know, was it 3? Yeah, so they are substantial numbers, again,
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah.
the menu, depending on what our appetite is.
Bill, would a roof replacement and window replacement project give us any kind of, on the grand scheme of thing, greater efficiency savings dollar-wise, to be able to reinvest here?
Energy-wise, yes.
Yeah, I mean, like thousands of dollars, or are we just talking
Oh,
about?
I would say,
Yeah, okay.
in the scope of what we spend, you know, upwards of, you know, you'd probably be looking at thousands of dollars for
Each year?
each year
Or at
of
least
energy. I
the
mean,
first couple
even
years,
changing
yeah.
out boilers, you could save thousands of dollars. So
Okay.
there is some substantial savings to those programs.
Grants for those?
I haven't seen, there's some grants, usually through the MSBA is where you find your,
Right.
what I've
So there
seen
wouldn't
is.
be any energy grants?
There are, and we do work, like this summer, we worked with National Grid to change every light bulb out in the district, which was, you know, we changed over 10,000 light bulbs.
What would you save in energy?
We're working on that now. We just put them in place, so now I'll be watching the differentials between year to year and pick up that cost. But we saved a lot on just replacement costs, because I didn't have to buy the light bulbs. They were all free. You know, we just had to install them. We were just told that we were one of the only schools that actually did it. Everyone else has them in their garage.
We'll take the bulbs.
Right, right. They're waiting to get the labor to put them in, so.
You were doing a study of the Emerson School and converting that over to propane,
Yes.
and is a similar thing feasible or reasonable at the high school?
It is, but like the Emerson propane conversion, through the iterations of that project, we found that just the market volatility of propane that we saw,
Yeah.
and where oil has been going, and the actual needs that we'd have to put underground tanks,
Right.
the cost benefit just wasn't there. So
Okay. No.
today,
Okay,
our option was to stay oil here.
yeah.
5 years from now, we could have a different conversation. And it's always an option, and we did explore it. Solar is an option, you know, doing this hybrid systems around propane and solar, and
Yeah.
in 5 years, that could absolutely be an option.
I was just wondering if they even made propane for boilers that big, but.
Oh, sure, yes.
Okay.
Geothermal out of the question?
Well, we have our well there, so we'd have to do,
You'd have to
But-
drill someplace else.
No, geothermal's not out of the question, it's just a expensive
Right, I mean,
option.
that's, if
Actually,
we,
there's a lot of grants for it.
And
if we can get
looking at
grants
it,
for that.
you know, if there's grants
Yeah.
available, that's,
Huge.
I
It's
would
just a
think,
great heating and cooling option,
Yeah.
you know, to look at for saving
It
for
is.
both.
and when we got to that point, I think that's, I'd explore everything that
What
was
do
up.
you mean when you got to that point?
Well, when we're looking at boiler replacement,
But wouldn't you wanna do that ahead of time so that you would, I mean, if you wait until you need the boiler, you don't have a choice, you've gotta go to the boiler, you don't have time.
sure, right now, I don't see the boilers, you know, again, barring a catastrophic failure, needing any kind of repair for the next 7 to 10 years.
Is do we spend a lot in oil?
But no, we're fairly efficient. I think we're right in the, you know, we do a lot of preventive maintenance and we tune the boilers up every year and, you know.
Because from, right now, what I'm hearing is that the rebates for the return on investment is huge right now for geothermal.
For geothermal. I'll look at it. Be happy to. I think it's always a good option.
Because I don't know, there's usually a time limit on
Rebates provided by whom? In your,
Government.
sorry?
The government.
So,
The
the state
government
or federal or other?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, I didn't ask them. A lot of paperwork.
And they're expensive because they do require a deep, high-volume well.
Yeah, initially, that's why we had the rebate,
Right.
because it's high, but, I mean, it keeps everything at 72, which is nice.
Are,
It's high in my house.
do any of the things on this spreadsheet, most of the school is inside the, what do you call it, Zone 1 because of the well?
Yes.
Would you need some kind of special blessing or dispensation from DEP to do anything on this list because of the well?
They would probably catch me on, they would probably look to talk to us on, yeah, catch me, I guess is the wrong one. I wouldn't be hiding it. They would probably question any substantial renovations. I think general maintenance were okay, but if we went to expand the science lab or expand it outside of our building
Well, I was
envelope,
looking at enclosing the, what was it? Enclosing the thing next to the cafeteria.
the courtyard there?
Yes.
In order to get a permit for that, yes, I would need DEP.
But I don't see anything else on here that.
No, the boilers, you know, if we did boilers and if we changed out oil tanks or did
Oh, that's-
something, then I'd have to speak with the DEP.
Right.
But, no, it's substantial build-out or renovations, anything that really affects the water flow or we
We're
disturb the
not really
ground.
affecting anything below ground level on any of this stuff, except perhaps the cafeteria.
And even that, they were, when we did the concession stand and the remodel of the garage there, we went through the DEP for, you know, a special permit and they were very easy to work with.
Okay.
They understand our situation.
Okay.
And like us, they would rather see the well way out back, away from the building, but it is what it is.
And what is it to move that?
To move the well, honestly,
You put it on the other side of the pipeline, wouldn't you?
yeah, that's my thought. I don't know how I mean, to get across the
They won't let
pipeline
you
would
cross
be,
it.
I mean, an act of Congress, probably literally, but it would be difficult. I wouldn't even be able to fathom a guest.
You
Okay.
couldn't go to the other side of the parking, like if you went to the far end of the building on the other side, like behind the tennis courts?
The problem with there is our wastewater treatment plant and our
Oh, right.
leaching fields are there. So
it's
we
close.
we have such a tight location that any way you bring it, you just are moving the problem.
How about
Right.
the tennis courts? The old tennis courts?
It still puts you across the
Pipeline?
pipeline, doesn't it?
Well, no, the old tennis courts are up on the hill. If you pop the wellhead in there, I mean, you would still capture a good portion of the building into the Zone 1, and you'd also pick up Green Road and some of the neighbors' houses across the street, which could
That
be.
would not be good public relations.
Would
What if-
not.
What's the
Uh,
diameter
what's
of
it?
the zone one
I
for?
believe it's a 275-foot diameter.
And have you just done a what if you had 2 or 3 wells, something that I see happening in the planning world, you just get 2 wells or 3 wells to reduce your diameter, but you pull the same amount of water out, even though the wells are only 50 feet apart or something
But
like
that
that.
would, each
But I
one of
think
them would
each
have
well
to-
requires.
Yeah, would have.
Actually, you can reduce the circle on all your wells, you can get this full volume, but just by having 3 wells instead of 1. This is pretty typical strategy that people who have tight lots do with public wells. So you might want to just find out what's possible in that score, and that may give you surprising flexibility.
Because maybe you could put one up front.
And it's kind of stupid that you, just because you have 3 wells instead of 1, your circle gets smaller, but that's apparently the way they think about stuff.
Right. But I think that would be looking at a major remodel of the building. Right now, our well has a good volume, and it's been a producing well.
So by putting in a 4-season enclosure in the courtyard, what would be the purpose of that?
That would add additional cafeteria space, and we originally talked about adding some space for the study hall.
Because that's a huge area.
That is a big area.
That's almost bigger than the cafeteria, right?
It's pretty darn close.
Yeah, I would bet you're right in the ballpark. Yeah, it's probably bigger. I looked at there, yeah, that is bigger. I looked at it as you could see it kind of similar to where number 4 is.
Yep.
I looked at, you could see the yellow little sketch out there. That was about a 1,500 square foot.
That's all you're gonna do?
Well, that was just a thought. Again, this is just,
Couldn't do the whole thing?
you could do more.
So that 130 only represents that little piece?
No, this would probably be more than 130. 130, I looked at putting a modular maybe out back between the wood shop.
Oh, no. Cover the whole thing.
Yeah, it would be more expensive, but it could be done.
Well, I mean, you've already got,
It's a lot of area in there. You're probably looking at,
I mean, you're looking at columns, you're looking at some footings, but why not?
It's only money.
Right.
Well, no, because you could make the whole thing is you need sunlight. I mean, you could make it sunlit. I mean, you could make it all glass if you wanted to.
Sure.
You know, and you could put a lot of classrooms in there.
yeah, you probably before.
And add to the cafeteria.
So anyhow, because fiscal year 17, you brought everything near future, so it's kind of discussable. It's always going to be in the discretion of figuring out what's the priority, right? And so you just
This
did it
here
for
is
talking purposes, just.
This is our talk, all this
Yeah.
here is for our talking
Right.
purposes. This isn't anything
Right,
that.
just an idea sheet, not a
Right.
plan sheet, just so.
My actual budget
for clarity,
is
right,
different.
Yeah. Trying to help you out from
Okay.
critique.
So camera upgrades,
Yes.
adding a larger DVR and additional cameras. What are you guys doing with the network?
Well, I have that down here as IT network upgrades. That would be dependent on where the technology goes and what the requirements are, and
So is there any thought to actually, have they finished the 5-year plan yet? For the IT? Have they done their plan yet? 'Cause right now
They
it's
are just
2009.
about to finish it, yes.
All right, so, and that is the local area network and the wide area network upgrade, or is that just adding devices?
Well, it's a wide array of things. It's looking at,
Because I'm really skeptical that adding cameras and keying and building management systems to the network is a good idea until you had that commissioned.
well, and that's why I put IT network upgrades, because like I said, anything, it's, everything grows off each other, and depending on what we want to do for scope, by adding, cameras, we add servers, by adding servers, we add HVAC, by adding HVAC, we need more space, but,
Yep.
so things do build off each other, and
They do. But, I mean, right now the complaint is that the network's not adequate.
Right, and that's why today I wouldn't add additional servers, because I think we, need that plan. But I'm hoping in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years.
But you have the server on next year.
I think we're getting off topic.
Yeah.
And that's fine, it's just.
Hey, that may not
it
be
all
a
adds
server.
up.
That may not be a server. That could, I also did replacement of cameras. Each camera is, $2,000.
Mhm.
We have, a bunch of cameras, so you start looking at replacements and change outs of old servers for new servers.
Yep.
Not so much, not so always growing, it's just general repairs and maintenance
Okay, so to get back on topic, the purpose of all this is the mechanical.
purposes.
You're just talking about the existing mechanical and where it sits today.
Correct.
And what you're saying is it's all adequate as long as we maintain it.
Yes. Yeah, like I said, following a good regimen over the next 10 years, the building we have today is the building we have in 10 years. with hopefully some improvements. You know, I'm not looking here at putting on a second floor or adding a geothermal system or enhancing the network to a, you know.
There's no degradation in water, there's no degradation in air or air, you know. There may not be any huge improvements either, but there's no degradation in any of the basic infrastructure of the school.
Correct. And my thought was this committee would look at where do we want to go beyond that.
Right.
I think it's important that we at least know that we need to have a building in 10 years.
Right.
What we want to do beyond status quo is,
And
Right.
we're only talking about the high school.
I'm just talking about the high school.
But it doesn't include, once again, it's keeping things where they are today. So if you have heating and cooling issues today, all this stuff keeps your heating and cooling issues in the future.
Yes, but we also, every year, I try to improve what we have. You know, like,
I'm
I
not
see
saying we
we
don't
have
try to do
issues.
things, but
This doesn't.
it's not a global fix. It's a,
Right.
if we can eke out something here, we can eke something out there, we're trying to improve it along the way, but it's not a global fix.
Correct. This doesn't look at, you know, ABC Engineering coming in and
Yep.
fixing everything. This is us maintaining and chipping along and keeping the building running and improving every year, which is what my goal is.
When someone does retro commissioning, do they take into account the improvements needed as beyond?
It depends on.
Yeah, I
what
think-
they are.
They would normally make recommendations on things that you could improve on. So there's things that are, you know, easy to do, you should do right away. There's kind of improvements that you could do that they would normally say you invest a little bit of money, there's more return because there's
Yeah.
more bang for your buck. And then there's, you know, other things that are more bigger picture that you would get improvements, but you'd have to spend the money to get those
Okay.
other improvements.
So one lesson from this, given that you have a number, 3.8 million, so one lesson is in the vicinity of $400,000 a year, on average, over the course of 10 years, is what it takes to just keep the mechanicals of the building going.
Yeah.
And
I
that's just a
think
fact
that's-
of life, got a school, got to maintain it, so it takes that much just to keep it livable.
Yes.
I wanted to say that it looks like you spent a lot of time and put a lot of detail into this report, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
I can see what it, to me, I take from this is if we do nothing at all and keep the school status quo, this is how much it's gonna cost. If we do a little bit of upgrades, not a lot, but a little, this document would be how much it costs. But there's no numbers in it. So, that's what I see.
We get to pick our numbers.
Right.
Right, that's the buffet.
Right, our job isn't to go through and decide if they need a key or a DVR system or whatever. That's the maintenance department, that's not our committee's
It's all
job.
connected.
But it's not our job. And we'll be here till midnight if we go through
And
every
you're
single
right,
thing.
you're right, but the problem that I'm having on school committee is that we keep adding on
But this
systems.
is a school committee.
No, and I get it, but what we decide here is gonna go to school committee's recommendation.
Yep,
And anything that we do, it affects IT, it affects mechanical, it
Correct.
affects all that stuff. So to say, you know, would you like to have it? Yeah, I'd love to have it, but I don't have the system that can handle it.
but I don't think that's part of our job here in this committee. Our job is to decide
But
status quo, remodel, rebuild,
But, and,
or recommend, not even decide, recommend.
and that's fine, and you'll make a recommendation, the school committee will take it under advisement, and they'll
Yes.
probably agree with it. The problem is if we don't have the background to know what's gonna happen, we're gonna agree to it, and we're gonna say, okay, we wanna go do this, and now the IT guy has to do something, the mechanical guy has to do something. And all of a sudden, we've created a situation, we can't afford it.
But I think there's gonna be another committee after us, Mr. Wood, who, none of us are experts in any of these areas.
Nope.
So I think there's gonna be other people after us who look at this and then make those decisions. You or I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I think there's a difference here between identifying the needs and identifying the solutions. And I don't think we can do anything but identify the extremely high-level solution. And basically, it's slight modification, major modification, new facility, right? I mean, that's about as granular, I think, as this committee can get.
We can't even do that. I mean, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I don't even know how we can actually have this conversation without having a commissioning guy go in and say, this is where we're at and this is what you need. and this is where you need to go to. So, are we having this conversation to try to decide whether we're having a new building, or we're actually gonna do the work and keep the building?
By way of analogy, and again, this isn't, just because Concord Carlisle did it, that doesn't mean it's right for us. But if you go to their website and you download their final master plan, they brought in experts to look at the foundation, the electrical, and this is separate companies. They brought in one company to look at the electrical, another company to look at the water, another company to look at the HVAC, another company to look at the air quality. They were looking at things that I never even heard of. But they brought in all these experts to say, here's where you are now, and here's what you're gonna need to do to take this current facility and upgrade it to here. That, I believe, was an enormous expense before they ever decided what to do. It's also, we in this room don't have the expertise to substitute for that. I don't know if their feasibility committee commissioned that, and we would be comparable to their feasibility committee, or if their building committee commissioned all those studies. My guess is it was the building committee.
It was.
But, you know, I think we've got to, even so, their final master plan was to keep their school and modify it extensively. In the end, they built a whole new school, and I don't have an explanation as I sit here as to what caused that transformation.
No.
I do have the names of a couple people that I met on the tour who are on the building committee, and after I read all the stuff that they've got online, I'm gonna call them up and ask them that question among others.
Yeah.
But their building committee recommended an extensive renovation, and something happened that they turned around and decided to build a whole new school.
When you
No.
say extensive, pretty much the whole thing?
I think they were gonna demolish, they had 4 buildings that were connected to each other, if I recall correctly. And they were gonna demolish one of them, rebuild that one, and then do extensive renovations on the other 3.
Renovation's usually more expensive.
Yeah.
Could that have been part of the process, that they went to the state saying, hey, we have a need, they got in the queue, and through the state process, that's the team they got to kind of go flush all that stuff out and say, we're gonna determine what what we see your needs as being, and what we'd be willing to kind of pay for.
As I understand the process, if you partner with MSBA, they then require you to do all those
Yep.
studies.
Yeah.
Pretty
On
much
your
they're
dime.
trying to-
Yeah, correct,
They're
correct,
not
but
gonna
it's part
subsidize
of that
Right.
state process. It's not
Right.
just, we'll go hire people that we feel like.
Right.
You're going through pre-approved people from the state to kind of get a team together to go
Right.
do
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
stuff.
And
So we're really kind of a step before that,
Right.
trying to say, do we have a need to go take that step?
exactly.
And ask the state that, hey, we want to move forward and do something, whatever that something is. And then they kind of do, make you pay for an evaluation to say, well, let's take a closer look at this, and with the experts to kind of see if you really do need this stuff or what their recommendations are.
One of the things that struck me on their early reports was their concern for whether or not their old building could meet seismic standards for the next 50 years. And I didn't know, I still am not sure what that means, but, that's not a question we're gonna answer in this committee, right?
No, we're supposed to just identify the need. I think we all agree, at least most of us, that there is a need, and that's why we're working on the report, and we're gonna present it to the school committee in the tri-town meeting, and then it goes from there. This is the way I understand it.
Right.
Yeah, but one of the things I think that Bill is telling us that I think is important to what we're doing at the level we're doing at, is that there's no impending failures of major systems.
That's good to know,
Right.
but we're bursting at the seams at the building. I mean,
Right,
that's
right.
not the
But that's just
only
space.
thing to look at.
No, but
But it's good
it's
to
nice
know.
that we don't have
It's
to
not
worry
an
about that too.
emergency.
Right.
Right. It's not an emergency, the kids can still learn and still go there safely, but they're bursting at the seams,
Right,
they have a need.
right.
And we've reduced the need a little bit with the 2 classrooms.
Barely.
Yes,
I
but.
think that's like throwing a pebble in a pond.
Once again, in the Concord Carlisle example, they had modular classrooms, and their NEASC report criticized them for not having running water and bathrooms in those modular
How many
classrooms.
did they have?
More than 2 was the way they were talking about them. I got the impression there were 4 or 5 modular classrooms, but it doesn't specifically say.
Doesn't the 2 classrooms get offset with kind of anticipated more students? So it's kind of more just a wash, kind of where they were gaining a couple
Well, yeah.
of classrooms, but where.
But again, even if you were to put those on pads and make them permanent, the lack of running water and
Yeah.
bathrooms
Yes.
is a long-term, they're not a long-term solution, they're a Band-Aid.
You sent us an enrollment study from Brookline or somebody?
Brookline, yeah,
And they were using a 75% utilization rate
yeah.
in their study,
As opposed to the 93.
as opposed to 90, whatever,
93 is what we're gonna do.
where we're at.
Right. So, and I'm only bigging Concord Carlisle up because that's the only district I've really looked at closely. Not that I'm not from there originally, so I don't really care what they do.
I think it'd be interesting for us to discuss whether or not we want to have as part of our interim report too, or a timeline to get to this place where we have such a recommendation that we have identified needs and that there should be a further look and studies to really flesh out those needs and greater data around costs.
Do you think that would happen before January?
Well, I mean, I think we have to discuss it. I mean, our report, our work, I think shows a lot of concrete data. I bet if we went around the table, we would have a reasonable consensus that there are needs. We may disagree on what the needs are, but that there are needs. You know, to kind of move along, I think we need that kind of recommendation to
Yeah.
get to discussion and getting the school committee to commit to a feasibility study, which is quite costly, especially for the scope of what we're talking about. To give you a sense, it was a little less than $200,000 just to do the feasibility study that we did for the science labs.
But otherwise, we're just going in circles and we're not making any progress. I mean, we
Right.
have to start, and if that's where you start, that's where you start.
But would we do that feasibility study before going into the state process, or being in the state process and then doing a feasibility like that?
I need to pick up on that. When we did center, we did the feasibility process before. I think since then, and the reason being is that MSBA was not fully operational in its current existence now. Since they are, I think they like people to partner with them before entering feasibility so that they know who's on the horizon. It doesn't necessarily get you in a queue, but it gets you on their horizon, and then you discuss, you know, next steps and so forth, which would be the feasibility study. And depending on how fast you get the feasibility study done, then you get in the queue.
Because we don't, at least I personally don't want another year to go by. I think we need to, the
Action.
longer we wait, the longer it's going to take for this building to get either built or renovated, and the more need we're going to have.
Right.
I mean, it's really a bummer that we missed the last one in January. So if we
Actually, I
miss the
don't think
next
so.
one-
I think if you rush in, you can end up with a bunch of communities that don't have consensus, and they say no, and then you get to wait a few more years.
I'm talking about the
Concord
feasibility
took
study.
20 years to get to their high school.
Well, I don't want to take.
So, I think what we're looking for is we want to build consensus here
Right.
and at the school committee and among the towns, and
Yes.
rushing in is not
I
necessarily the
didn't
way to
say rush
consensus.
in. We need the feasibility study, so
Right.
we have concrete things to look at. None of us here at this table can do that. All we can do is offer our opinions.
Right.
And I would just add that, this is 20/20 hindsight, but this would have been the wrong year to propose a feasibility study at Bolton town meeting, given the way everything else went. So,
Would that have to be retalked or town to approve it?
I'm sure we would have to bond the cost of it, yeah.
So it would have failed, which would have been a disaster because it would have cost more money to go start over again.
yeah.
I, seriously, if you could take a look, I mean, if you think that you can enclose one of those courtyards, I mean, if you could take a look at that, I mean, that could be a self-contained area where you could put a lot, and I think you could probably even go up 2 stories. You know, even if the second floor was just open so the sunlight was going in, 'cause the big issue is sunlight, because it's interior.
The bigger issue is the elevator access. You have to have, when you have a second story, you have to have elevator access.
Are there 2 levels right there? Was it just single?
No, it's single.
It's single? Well, they do have elevators that push from the bottom, so that's not so bad. You're only going up 1 story. So it's not as complex as some, so you just kind of,
Mhm.
you probably know more about
Takes up
elevators than I do,
space.
but,
Yeah,
you know, so it wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, you could
they're expensive.
cantilever out over several classrooms in all directions. and-
Anything you money, you guys
Well,
flip.
That's it. One of the things
It's easy to swallow.
that this, you know, we said on our first interim report, we're gonna look at the 10-year plan. And, you know, we don't have to decide this tonight, but I think we've done this. I think this is pretty comprehensive. But the other point I'd want to put on the table for consideration is that when we do our next interim report, that I would feel comfortable making a statement that there are no major systems in imminent danger of collapse for the immediate future, for the foreseeable future. Because that will be a question that people ask. Aside from overcrowding, do you have any system issues that are going to hit us really hard, that would provoke us to build a new facility instead of renovate? And at this point, I would say no. So it's just something to consider for next interim report.
The other thing that, to me, we kind of focus on the 2 things, but out of that 10-year plan, that those, whatever it is, 6 or so projects at the bottom of the 10-year plan that don't have numbers associated to it, that, you know, kind of, those are the projects that if you wanted to improve
Right.
on things, they're gonna be much more substantial cost associated with that, although there's not estimates or anything for that.
And those are
now.
areas I think that we should, if we are looking at the space we have and believe that we would need to bring in an architect or an engineer and work with them to.
No, but we could identify these would be the things, and there would be substantial costs associated
Yes.
with implementing some of these upgrades in the existing building.
Yeah. Well, if I could change subjects a little bit here while Bill's here, but a couple weeks ago, or maybe 2 months ago, we had a discussion about specifically lighting in the hallway outside the auditorium, but it then expanded into a discussion on lighting throughout the school. And some of us feel that the lighting in the hallways and in the classrooms is dim, and the question was, is that just our perception? Has the lighting been downgraded? Does it all meet the requirements in the class? Is the lighting different in the classrooms than it is in the hallway? Has it been changed in the past few years? And, you know, someone suggested that it was all changed in an effort to conserve energy, and that's made the hallways in particular dimmer, and made it seem grimmer or grimier or something like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, the lights haven't been changed, the bulbs have been changed, and, you know, through technology and time, we
Yeah.
put higher efficiency bulbs in there, but usually we do watch the lumens that
The
those
lumens
bulbs put out,
in the same-
and make sure we're not, you know, saving $1, but
Right.
turning it into a cave.
Okay.
So we do watch that, and we haven't gone in that direction. We haven't done any kind of substantial renovation or repair that we've removed fixtures. In fact, we try to add them. We've been going through the auditorium area, we've added fixtures. Actually, in the auditorium, we added probably 30 or 40
Wow.
ceiling units in there, and we changed all of them out to LED.
Okay.
And we did that, I think that was a year and a half or 2 years ago. We're now moving out into the hallway in the auditorium, because that's been an area we've identified as, this year specifically, as study space.
Yeah.
So that lighting, I don't think in that hallway is suitable for studying. It may be for, the entry to a show, but it's not for studying.
Okay.
So we're gonna be working on that ceiling area, putting in new LED lighting and bringing that up.
Now, that's more spotlighting when you say LED, right? As opposed to fluorescent or whatever?
No, we do, when we can, we do LED fluorescent
Okay.
fixtures also. Anytime we
So
can.
that's existed, okay.
Yeah, they do, and we've been testing a few out here and there. I'm not totally sold on, going that way, but we have changed out to higher efficiency fluorescent bulbs.
And is there a standard for classrooms lighting that's different than standards for hallway lighting? And have we ever tested that?
Not in my time here, I haven't. No, I don't.
Do you have a tester?
When they
I
were
actually
built,
have-
they were, tested for a
I-
number
Yeah,
of
it's changed.
lights.
I'd have to take a look. I'll check with my electrician. I think we may have a lumen tester. It would be old, but we may have
It will
one.
still work, but the lumens back in the 70s was much higher
Right.
for the requirements, so you're supposed to measure at dust height, so
I could
it's
take a look.
50.
I mean, that would
Unless it's
be,
changed, it's 50.
I think, for me personally, the lighting level of the school has a big impression on my sense of the interior of the school overall.
I agree.
So,
It's-
not as a committee member here, but just as someone whose kids go to school there, personally, I would just broadly say I'd like to see it brighter inside, but
But
that's just
It
my
de-
prejudice, and
it
but if we
depends on
can
what
get
they're
checked.
doing. They need to measure at the dust type, but depending on what you use, as they go through it, sometimes they want the cave effect, so there's no light reflecting off the ceiling.
Yeah,
And then sometimes they reflect the light off the ceiling. We're used to the light reflecting off the ceiling from when we went to school, because they like the higher lumens. So basically, now you get more of a cave-like effect at the ceiling, but where you need to measure is here. So
Yeah.
you and I, when we walk in, we have a different effect because of what we grew up with. But the measurements at the desk.
so things were better then,
Absolutely, weren't they? We should go back to that.
But I think, it's certainly not a committee request, but,
it would be easy enough to go through and take a few random samplings around the building and
yeah.
come back and let you know what I
Every
find.
class is probably different.
Yeah, it could be. I think if I, spoke to the foreign language rooms and.
Well, they're all
Just
supposed to be the
as many
same,
as I could.
but they're probably different, and it depends on the type of light too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
But you gotta measure at the desk,
okay.
except for out in the parking
So-
areas, then you gotta measure at the floor.
So I want to make sure Heather's point doesn't get lost, or we feel we've we've addressed it. Because I think your points, Mark, are well taken. We've got to make sure that we're building consensus among the communities for anything that's going to happen, including budgets,
Yeah.
just year-to-year budgets. But I haven't seen the timeline yet from MSBA. I'm assuming they're going to follow a similar timeline. They'll probably come out somewhere in November or December with their SOI, their statement of interest. I do think it would be worthwhile to have conversations with somebody at MSBA before that timeline. You said something that I'm not sure if you were talking about the report we're doing now, or that you're envisioning a third report. But I go back to my question that I asked a little earlier. Is it possible for us to add to the report that we have on the table now, the second interim report, that simply says that the committee, and let's obviously discuss it, but the committee has identified needs that need to be, that solutions have to be found, and urge the school committee to debate and discuss how to proceed on those.
Yeah.
Is it generic that there's needs, or like a specified, here are the following?
Well, I
needs?
open that up for that conversation. I mean, I think
I think
generic is safest, but
I think we need to issue a final report when we think we're done.
Yes.
which would say that kind of stuff. I think the point of the interim reports is to go out and tell people the conclusions we're reaching as we reach them, so there's not too much to absorb or be surprised at the end. So I would expect the final report to recap everything in the first two, but just have, fewer issues outstanding that we need to address.
And what would be a timeline that people feel comfortable to get to? And I suppose we need to know a little bit more about what we still have yet to do to get to that final report.
My reaction to that is that I'd like to get the demographic data in my hands. I don't know how long that's going to take. And the other big nut for me, well, there'd be two more. Evaluate the effect on student outcomes of the meeting space, the administrative and professional spaces needed. Try to get our arms around that as best we can. And then the other question is the curriculum question. How much does the curriculum change such that specialized spaces are going to continue to be needed? Because that's going to, I have no idea how to resolve that question either.
And that plays into, what are we?
That plays into?
Are we a standardized school, or are we
Comprehensive?
Comprehensive.
High school?
Yeah,
that plays into that?
It's a bigger question than I thought we were going to have to wrestle with, but now that we've got concrete evidence of its effect, I think we need to address it somehow. And I don't know, as I sit here right now, exactly how to address it. Part of my reason is, I think if we just decided to address it, I think the school committee would be mildly irritated.
I think it would help them, because it would let them know that there is a question. Right now, they don't
Well, I
know
think we
that
can
there is
present
a-
the question. I don't know that that's, I mean, if they want to turn around and say, why don't you guys go answer that, that would be fine. But I don't know that we get that kind of answer, or what course the school committee would want. And I don't know that it's appropriate to throw it out on the table when we're going to mention it whenever we go, if it's June 3rd, we'll mention that that's an outstanding issue. I think we have one meeting before June 3rd here. We may want to discuss whether or not we want to refine that question and put that before the school committee for resolution also, in addition to the demographic question.
Bob, where's the appendix with my stuff?
I don't have a copy of the report.
It's not on there?
It's the last page, I think.
Yeah. You don't, you're the old one,
There wasn't a last page on mine, that's all.
draft.
Now see,
No,
Mark
it doesn't
had
have
2
last
extra
page.
pages. Yes, copy.
That's what I figured. No, it's not there.
They were blank, but he had 2 extra pages.
Thank you.
Is it? Okay.
Can you
He
just,
printed it for me, he left my page out.
can you just quickly run down that list just for,
Sabotaging.
can you just quickly recite that list for our benefit, for those of us who don't have that page?
Me?
Since we're talking
You
about.
don't have that page either?
No, I have the page.
Sabotage everyone's packet?
I printed everything wrong.
Just for our benefit to hear topics on the what more might we be thinking about.
Okay. Are you gonna, should I just read one at a
Just
time?
read 'em.
You
Yes,
guys
read-
gonna say something?
No,
after each
just
one?
read them right down so we can get a sense
Size
of
of
it.
auditorium, max capacity 650. Upper gym, weight room, locker rooms. Size of the front office. Guidance suite, lack of privacy and conference space and waiting area. Size of media center. Cafeteria, 4 22-minute lunches, is larger cafeteria needed. Freshmen are sharing lockers, at least 100 lockers short. Faculty lounge, lack of, ? Too small, ? Size of nurses area, size of teacher prep / resource room on the side of the library. amount of office space for each department, amount of small student meeting spaces, hallway width appropriate to volume of students, kitchen outdated, built in 1962, parking limitations, special ed classrooms are disjointed and too small, 10% of the population benefit from special ed services, loss of the school store, roof, HVAC, and other building systems. There is no priority to that list.
Who made the list?
Pardon me?
Who made the list? Okay.
Most of it, some of it at the end was brainstorming last week, 2
Okay.
weeks ago.
So these are things that came up just from meetings and stuff?
Yeah.
Things that
In the
came up
past 2
that
years.
really haven't, that really aren't addressed in the report proper, but they did,
They were discussed, but not
had
really
had
fleshed out.
sufficient discussion
Okay.
over the course of the
So-
meetings that.
And they're on the final page of that interim report.
Okay, and so HVAC, we came to the conclusion that status, we can keep going and improving as we go along, it's safe, it's working now.
Yes. But
But
But it doesn't take care of deficiencies.
improvements and changes and,
Some rooms are
And
hot, some
needs.
rooms are cold, you know,
right.
it's not consistent throughout the building, is what we've learned.
And as we add and grow and maybe pick off the other list, all that changes.
Right.
'Cause
not, yeah, not to be facetious, but in some ways, the heat or lack thereof in some rooms kind of addresses the locker issue because kids have to wear their jackets all day. 'Cause it's
Well, I work for a
You know.
chemical company, and at one point in time, I told them, when you finish, just give everyone a sweater. Everyone complains about them. It's
Yeah.
never right.
So they all interweave into each
Yeah,
other,
they do.
depending,
Yep.
you know,
You can't touch one without affecting another.
absolutely not.
So I guess, Bob, maybe the question is, do we just need to finish the things on your list with your demographics and stuff, or do we all need to discuss the things in the appendix?
No, I think the things in the appendix need to be discussed. I was just kind of focusing on the big ones that
Mhm.
I think are really difficult to narrow down. Some of them overlap, some of them are, you know, the meeting space of teacher collaboration for administrative and professional tasks. I think there are 3 or 4 bullet items there that would fall into that.
Yep.
Just as a first step to doing something in that area, I'm not sure really how useful it would be, but I would at least want to, I guess, sit down with Perry and Jody, if it's okay with the rest of the committee, and just literally list out all the people and the jobs and make a really detailed list of that and the sped space issues too, because I have very little understanding of that program and how it affects the space needs. But, you know, sort of doing I'd like to go in and offer to do a deep dive like I did for the science labs, and I think I'm just gonna come back with a list, but at least it's something for us to work with, if that's okay with everybody?
Yep.
Sure.
All right, okay.
One impression I have from reading that list is that something we haven't quite talked as a topic is just common areas. So hallway is a common area. It turns out the cafeteria is a particular kind of common area. You could even call the administration offices a particular kind of support and common area. And that might be a useful word to
Mhm.
think about in terms of thinking about some of those things on
I
the
think we
agenda.
need to add library to this list,
That's
um,
not easy.
Yeah.
because of the email that we got.
From Susan?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think any of us were aware of that issue.
And I guess one of the things that we had as action items all the way back to the first report was develop a detailed list of the heating and ventilation issues. And I know it's been discussed on, you know, generally in a number of meetings, but I don't think we really have
The detail.
the details of those heating and ventilation issues that, you know, one might say, if you're gonna do an upgrade to go fix all the things, what are all the things that are wrong that you're trying to fix. So, I mean, I think that might be helpful to get that kind of feedback of, you know, kind of where are the, you know, whatever, the heating and
You want me
ventilation
to
issues.
work with Bill, put that together?
I mean, I think that'd be
Okay.
helpful to have when we
Is that
talk
all right?
about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So would one of those areas be like, there may be uninsulated walls in some locations, and so that's a heating issue? Is
Well,
that
there's
what you
inefficient
contemplate
heating,
besides
cooling.
equipment?
Well, it's not only equipment, just if there's certain rooms or areas that are too cold, too hot, too whatever, you know, that there's, you know, kind of some sort of identifiable issue, rather than, you know, we have heating and cooling issues.
Right.
Right, part of that, I think, really comes into that retro commissioning, is someone coming in, because a lot of the room too hot, too cold, I get a lot of reports, and it's very subjective, because I'll go on and say, well, we got 72 degrees right now, and say, oh, it's 100 degrees in my room. But it's actually
Yeah,
right on the number, so, I mean, there are issues, but definitively to say, oh, room 256 doesn't get enough air,
or maybe it's not room by
Yeah,
room, but it's just if it is an area or.
Yeah, at least if we catalog it, which is what I'd be doing, we know what we're talking about, or what issues, even if we don't have a solution for.
And the other thing, when we talked about the 10-year plan, which obviously we reviewed, but the capital improvement projects, you know, you had your, you know, kind of working list that you were working off of, but that 10-year list also had that, whatever it was, 6 or 7 upgrade projects, and I think kind of pulling some of that forward without having the cost associated with it, but that, you know, there are significant dollars for doing those upgrades. I think that should be identified.
So for Michael, going back to your question, I kind of have it in my head that around September.
Is it?
So,
So you gonna work through the summer?
I think that's a good time.
we did last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd go through withdrawal if we just stopped.
Oh, you won't.
I'd be shaking, sweating.
All right, we'll help you out.
So, are we still gonna meet with the school committee on June 3rd then, if we're not?
Yeah, because it's still the interim report.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, the interim report June 3rd.
Yeah.
Maybe hopefully finished by September, and then,
Then it's off the launch pad.
And that gives them a good month to deliberate on their next, you know, what they want to do. And if it is in fact to go forward with, you know, probably multiple steps that have to happen at the same time, including some relationship with MSBA, I think that's about the right time, you know,
Okay.
November, December to start with them.
okay,
It'll work out well.
yeah. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel now. I was just going through my notes again. It seems like I wrote down something about the music and band rooms. They're, are they dark or old? That's what I wrote down, dark and old.
Band room is, yeah, on the smaller side, but, yeah, it's not particularly well lighted. It's not poorly lighted though.
It's got natural lighting.
but actually, I bought all new lights for that room.
Oh, you did?
We have them stored right now. This summer, we're bringing the lift in, taking out all those old antiquated, crazy fixtures, and we're putting all new,
Oh, good.
you know, high lumen LED fixtures in, and we're planning on painting that room. I'm working with Joe, the new music teacher. I told him, get in there for a year, figure out what you want, and I'll meet up with him this summer. So my plan is to paint that room for him. If I can work in the budget, I'd like to put a new carpet in there and all new lighting.
I was gonna say, I mean,
So-
it just feels kind of
It is, and I told,
tired.
when he came on this year, I
New
said,
carpet, new painting, that'd be awesome.
I said, give yourself a year and figure out what you need, and I don't wanna just, I'll be working with him this summer.
Does
And we have the fixtures, we bought them already.
Does he have a carpet in there now?
He does, but it's
Oh.
old and stained,
I
and
was gonna say.
it's been beat up.
The carpet would affect the sound.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, they have sound panels there, I mean, it is made for it, but the paint is old, the paint, it's dark, there's a lot of dark woodwork in there, and again, the fixtures are old fixtures, and the bulbs can't be replaced anymore, so we just said enough, and we're gonna redo them.
We started this meeting, those many moons ago, with a tour of the high school.
Yes.
Would it make sense to do that again, now that everybody has talked about the school and the spaces for so long, to wrap our heads around what we're talking about again?
Great idea.
Yeah.
You know, I think it was an eye-opener for some people who hadn't been in the school much.
Yeah.
But now we're really talking nitty-gritty stuff, especially when we think about this list.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
When we hold our next meeting there.
Okay.
Good idea.
That's a good idea.
James will just have to get a handheld television. Walk around with it. So Perry, one of the questions that is actually on our agenda is to, it's not quite worded this way, but I think our task is to figure out some sort of metric that would inform this group and the public about how student outcomes would improve. I think this question was limited to the administrative space, but I think overall it's, you know, how does a new space, way back we talked about how does a new space, how does a space more in tune with the curriculum and the needs of the students, needs of the teachers and so forth, how does that improve outcomes? Have you given that any more thought about how we could do that?
Yeah, but I don't have any real good answer.
Yeah, no, I'm there too. I mean, it's a
Especially
question
if you
I
try
haven't
to-
heard asked before, and I still don't know that there are ways to create a
Well,
metric.
if
We'd
you,
have to create
especially
it
if you try to
ourselves.
get to quantitative, if you try to talk in terms of MCAS scores or AP test
Right.
scores, I mean, it's very hard to, I just don't know that you can,
Right.
because there's so many other variables that have such a big impact on those things.
One thought I did have when you were talking about, for example, really not having space to have, like, IEP meetings and those kinds of things is because of tight scheduling. Some of those meetings may have to be put off, and so you don't get going on the actual plan as quickly, and that could have sort of a cumulative long-term impact just from not getting on top of things as quickly as you might have if you'd been able to meet.
There are tons of speculative ways in which I could, I mean,
Right.
that's like, that's a speculative way. I don't know how I would capture that and
Right.
be able to say definitively, this did have, X.
But I guess there is not,
I mean,
all those things that-
I mean, I'll give you an example. So we have been doing AP testing for the last couple weeks. We have lots of kids at Neshoba who take AP tests, because lots of kids who take AP classes. There are regulations around how AP tests have to be done. And when you've got 150, 170 students who are taking AP psychology exam, which is great, and you have to make sure that they're all 5 feet apart from each other, how the heck do you do that? And so, I mean, we've had to set up all these crazy spaces in the building. The media center's been shut down for the last 2 weeks, essentially, every day. So you've got students who would normally go to the media center and want to do work, who are now displaced, so we've had to bring back, I shudder to say it, but we had to bring back cafeteria study for a while because those, Susan Farr's email mentioning how many students end up being in the media center every day when they have study, we can't fit that many kids in the auditorium foyer, so we've had to stick them back into the cafeteria in the interim because there's no other space large enough. So now kids are sitting back at the cafeteria tables rather than being in the media center to do their work. That has an impact on how well they're able to study. They don't have access to the same technology to be able to get work done. They don't have computers that they can be working on. So that has spillover effects. Could the taking an AP test in that type of environment have an impact on kids and how well they're able to focus? I hope not. But I mean, those are kind of speculative, second order, third order things that happen when you are really tight on space. But could I show that grades dropped for that 2-week period because kids didn't have access to this? No, I can't. So it's I mean, that's what I'm trying to wrap, to your question, what I'm trying to wrap my head around is capturing, how would you quantify things like that?
and to a certain extent, it's how do you quantify the road not taken?
Exactly.
Right. It almost has to be like,
the counterfactual.
we set up some sort of study with somebody else who did a new building. And somebody, and did a reno and did an ad
So we build a
reno.
new building so that we can study the
And did the study with them, and say, over the last 3 years, here's your baseline. Let's look at these 5 areas and see if attendance improved, core academics improved, number of kids, made the honor roll improve, But to do it based on what we already have for data, I mean, we'd have to go back to 2002 when that renovation completed, but I don't know that we have the data to be able to do that.
And you've got different teachers now than you had then.
Sure.
It's had a huge impact, and, even like, you in the interim report, you captured how many minutes of instruction are lost over the course of X number of days for the traveling teacher. You could look at, did the kids in the traveling teacher's class do as well as the kids in the non-traveling teacher's class? But again, there are other variables involved, and those aren't, it's not the same group of kids, there might be a natural difference in the group of kids, one of the teachers might be a more experienced teacher, done the class longer. It's so hard to quantify.
I thought when we were doing some of the visiting of the places that had done like new buildings and kind of whatever that were, comparable in size or whatever, I thought my recollection is we asked a few of those type questions of like, did you see a bounce in scores or kind of the different things, and my vague recollection is, kind of, there wasn't a whole lot of that concrete evidence even from those other schools is my recollection.
Yeah, and they've got their new school, they're not, they're not paying close attention to that. But as I think back over the interim report, we did have the detail about missing 4 minutes per class, but the really compelling part of that report was the kids who couldn't take the 5-credit science course.
Yep.
The kid who couldn't take the photography courses, who couldn't take the journalism courses and stuff like that due to lack of space. Those are missed opportunities on the upside. And so I think, again, to me, that's the most compelling thing in that report as opposed to, 4 minutes here, 4 minutes there. But maybe that's the way we need to approach these academic support and guidance in other areas is, what's the upside that we're not capturing because of that?
I did do an analysis, not super detailed, but I did do an analysis of the difference between 5-credit and 4-credit science classes. And the data is pretty consistent that students in the 5-credit class earn higher grades. Students in the 5-credit class in biology get higher scores on the biology MCAS. They're not, like incredibly different, but there's a slight consistent difference. And there can be some selection factors that go into that in kids who choose to take the 5-credit rather than the 4-credit, but there was a consistent trend.
Okay.
When kids have more educational opportunities, they tend to achieve it as well.
So I would look at it that way as what are the missed opportunities?
And would that be more of a, rather than trying to quantify with data, it'd be more like a list of things that are missed opportunities, and it's more just a list.
The guy from Princeton wanted to come in for interview a couple of students, but we didn't have space for him.
I'll put them in the cafeteria. I wouldn't say no.
No, I know.
Hear from William.
Williams,
It's hard to quantify these things, because unless you live it or breathe it, it's hard to understand it.
Right, but
So
it
one of
can
the-
still be dramatic, though.
Well, can I,
I'm sorry.
about a year ago, I don't know what ever came of it, but I had the idea and proposed it to the committee of someone making a student making a movie or a video to go along with our report to show the students in the AP class sitting 5 feet apart, and then everyone else has to pile into the cafeteria.
Yeah.
I mean, how would we know that unless we saw it, unless we sat here and listened to Harry say it?
Right. Okay.
We
I
did
think
actually-
the
we
townspeople-
tried some of those in the
They didn't turn out so
Well,
good?
it wasn't because of the, it was kind of a,
Okay.
it wasn't, the project wasn't handled the way you would want to handle something that was gonna be for public consumption.
Okay.
It was
What-
kind of independent stuff. But-
Okay.
So still a good idea,
Okay.
but keep going. Sorry.
Well, I'm not, no, I was gonna say, I'm not a AV or a film or whatever teacher, so I wouldn't be, I couldn't steer them in the right direction. But I think we need visuals. I think we need, short of bringing the school committee and everyone from the tri-town meeting around for a walking tour while the kids are in session to see them cramped. I think they need a visual on top of, to go along with, to complement this report. That's what,
Visceral emotion stuff.
yeah. Not everyone responds to numbers.
Okay.
I think one of the unrealized upsides, Bob, that you talk about, we have a growing mental health issue of anxiety. And kids having anxiety at school, and we don't have a place, we don't have a quiet room for someone to come in and take a breather, and have space. I'm juggling my office, another counselor's office, I'm leaving and working at a table so that somebody can have a quiet spot. That's nothing we would ever have data on, that's nothing we could ever document, even if we had it. But I can tell you, every counselor right now would tell you desperately when you ask about what do you need most, it's not the roof. We need a space, a transition space, for our kids who are having emotional difficulty during the day and need a place to regroup so they can pull it back together and get back into class and keep going with their day.
I think we could capture some of this, sorry, I think we could capture some of this stuff qualitatively and quantitatively. So, I mean, you can talk about missed opportunities and you can quantify X number of credit hours lost because these classes weren't available. I mean, I can throw in some stuff around biology 5 credit versus 4 credit. You know, we could try to, there might be some way to track the number of students who show up who aren't able to have, who needed or would have benefited from a personal space and didn't get a personal space. I mean, there might be some ways to attach data to qualitative stuff. So I think that's I mean, I don't know that I could frame it in terms of grades or test scores or things like that, but we probably could capture some quantitative data.
Or, you know, something like, you know, at XYZ school, the average college applicant makes 4 visits to the guidance center, we're only doing 2,
Right.
2.5 average per student, something,
I don't know.
you know, or something like that, or.
That's gonna take some sitting down and really thinking through. Big picture qualitative stuff, and then how are there ways to capture some of that quantitative data. So we could do that. What would you need something like this by? And what are we talking about?
I think it'd be one of the items for next year.
Wait
I was gonna
until
say-
September.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't have a deadline for finishing that, it's just the first step. So,
Maybe a qualitative
or, you know.
statement would be
I-
guidance to whether
Yeah, I-
any data is useful, you know, just being able to have an anecdote from your side.
You know, my proposal before was basically I just go in and catalog all the different, you know, how many guidance counselors there are and, you know, how many students each of them handles and stuff like that, and what space they do that all in. And basically that's, again, just a catalog, but maybe that's just the first step and then there's a follow-up after that. After you've had time to let some of this stuff percolate for a while.
So Jody, I'm really glad you brought up anxiety, and it's kind of off the topic a little bit, but it's been coming up a lot, and so I started reading about it, and they're like 3 years into the research, so they really can't say anything, but they're actually attributing it to the fact that we're not letting them figure themselves out at a young age, and by putting them in full-day kindergarten and full-day preschool and everything, and I know you love that, but there's no time for them to figure out, we're so busy telling them what to do, that when they get to that age, there's nobody there telling them what to do. They don't know. They don't know how to learn. They don't know how to, you know, just
To
figure stuff out.
internalize, to structure it themselves.
Yeah, they can't figure out who they are. So the problem starts much earlier, and we're just putting a Band-Aid on it, trying to find them the space so they can be quiet.
Well, it's a need. We're
Yeah, absolutely. But we're making the need.
It's interesting.
I mean, the studies aren't out yet, they're only 3 years into it, but it seems to be leaning in that direction.
So do we have a motion to adjourn? Or is there something else we should discuss?
Do you wanna sum everything up? I mean, what did we, I mean, I
So we meet one more time this year, right?
Yes, the next meeting is actually,
I have Wednesday the 27th,
right.
and that's going to be at the high school now.
Right. That is now a conflict.
Okay.
Can we look at the 28th? Was there a reason why I couldn't do the 28th? We normally are on Thursdays.
There might be, but Lorraine's not here. So I
Is on Lorraine.
This is June 27th?
No,
Oh,
May
right.
20th.
There was some sort of,
Yeah.
there was some sort of meeting or something that was a
That's at 5
conflict.
though, right?
I don't know what it was.
I do not have a conflict on the 27th.
Yeah.
I had a
How about
conflict
the 28th?
the 28th, I have a conflict, yes.
All right, so it was Perry.
It was Perry.
I'm always-
But is that the high school? Can we just go to the high school?
May?
Are you talking about the 27th, on the 27th?
No, the 27th is now a conflict for the school committee and myself,
So
so.
28th, I could be there starting at 7:45, 8 o'clock. I just can't be there at 7.
We could have dinner, a nice leisurely dinner at home and at 8 for a tour.
I mean, if you're gonna do a tour, if you can do the tour, then
Do you trust me?
I do not.
Spent a lot of time in guidance, folks.
Okay, so we're moving that now to Thursday the 28th.
Yep.
Okay.
And I will be at a meeting at the high school, so if that lets out earlier, then I can take over from Jody and try to minimize the damage.
He'll be speeding people along. What is this, space committee?
The next meeting will be at the high school on the 28th.
Should we?
So what is the start time?
And where will we convene at the high school?
Lobby.
In the lobby?
We'll start in the lobby
The
after.
dark cave-like lobby.
Is that a 7
You
PM
know,
or is
some
it?
architects plan that on purpose so that when you
Oh, I know
walk
they
in
planned it.
and you open it up, it's nice and bright.
I know, I know exactly what.
We don't have that either.
It was done on purpose.
It was, I know. I just don't like it.
That's a personal preference.
It is, isn't it?
It still works and it's still safe.
Should we pencil in a couple dates in June while we're thinking about calendars?
Works for me.
Oh, this is May 28th, I mean?
May 28th.
All right, well, people like, are we doing more than once a week, once a month?
Given the likely difficulty of meeting during the summer, it might be nice to capture a couple times in June while we still can, if other people can stand it. It's up to you all.
So how about the 4th and the 18th?
The 4th of June?
4th of June?
That would be
be a-
partying with the seniors at the senior banquet that night.
Oh,
so
that's
I will
right.
not be available.
That will also be just 1 week after our,
Yeah,
Prior
I was
meeting.
trying to get 2 in June.
So 11 and 25 was for Thursdays?
I'm not available the 25th, but,
I can't do the 11th either.
oh, wait a minute. I'm available the 25th.
Tuesdays, anybody?
Tuesday the 9th, I have undergraduate awards.
June is just a tough month. June might be a tough month to get 2 in.
I get it.
the 16th?
Tuesday the 16th? Going once, going twice?
Yeah, we do this.
Okay.
Okay.
So the 16th and the 25th?
16th of June, is that what we said?
Let's just do the 16th for June and try for 2 in July.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, I just put my snow thrower away this afternoon, so it's gonna snow soon.
I hear ya.
It's snowing in Canada.
Yeah, I got 6 inches.
Where?
Where his relatives live in New Brunswick, your aunt. She got 6 inches today.
How long is the summer?
2 weeks. Some of them have pools. Yeah, we're going to visit. Some of them have pools. I don't understand why they have them. They don't keep them.
The water up there is really cold.
July 7th, anybody?
I think we'll be away. Are we away that week?
Yeah.
But we don't have to.
How's everybody else for the 7th?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, for me, so far.
Yeah. All right. And 14 from there is the 21st. Do people have to do late in the evening in the summer, or do you have an earlier schedule? I'm putting them down at 7 p.m., but if people can do earlier.
I think people who have regular hours, 21st is okay with me.
And the 4th of August?
I will not be around for the first couple of weeks of August.
Yeah, I'll be out of the country.
How about the 18th of August?
Yeah.
It's a Tuesday, 7 p.m.
Yeah, I guess.
We're taking his vacation time away?
I don't know if we'll be able to make any of them that you've
I was
listed
gonna
so
say,
far.
you guys sound like you're having a lot of vacation this summer.
So
I wanna go with you guys.
I'm noticing,
Yeah.
at least speaking for my selectmen in my town, I know we meet on Tuesdays. I forget which Tuesdays of the month. So Don Hawks might complain that all the Tuesdays hit his selectmen days. I'm not sure if it's 2nd and 4th or 1st and 3rd or what.
Well, they'll cut back on that during the
So-
summer.
So we may hear news from everybody who's not here.
Right.
Or
They
should we
meet,
go
they
back
meet
to
2 weeks, every 2 weeks, all year long.
Go back to Thursdays?
I think so.
No. All of our committees cut back on the summer.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Got a plan.
So that August one, what was the last August one?
18th.
Okay.
We'll give it a shot.
Excellent.
Do we want to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.